Okay, can we make a start then? Good evening, everybody. And before we do start, can I remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the internet and the record is archived for future viewing. So with that being said, I'm joined on the top table by Marcus Goldsworthy, who's Head of Regeneration and Planning, and with our senior lawyer, James Doherty, and the Vice Chair, Margaret Wilkinson. So, and I know we've got another planning officer with us, Ian Robinson, who will be delivering some of the reports this evening. Apologies for absence. I can give Councillor Anthony Powell. I know he's on holiday. Okay, so that's Councillor Bird as well. Any other apologies?
Yep, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Eric Harker and Councillor Audrey Preston.
Lovely. Okay then, with those being said, minutes of the last meeting, members happy that we signed those minutes as a true record from the last meeting?
Yeah.
Okay then, I'll sign them off. Thank you. To receive declarations of interest under the Council's Code of Conduct, I certainly can start it off on agenda item 10, Sully Sports Club in South Road, Sully, which is item 2015/00843/full. I'm a member of the club. I'm the club secretary and director.
I need to declare an interest in that same application. A family member is involved with the developer.
Okay.
Can I also ask for clarification, please, in respect of 2016000987 full? Clearly, they're members. Is it okay for us to continue to consider that, or do we have to declare anything?
We took legal advice this afternoon, and you don't have to declare an interest. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I'd like to declare an interest in 2016000987 since I am one of the applicants on
Okay,
that application.
that's noted. Yes.
And I also will withdraw from the room as well.
Yes, and I know me and my colleague, Wyn Roberts, will be withdrawing from the room. Okay, so that... Sorry, didn't see that side. Yes.
Yes, I will withdraw as well. 20160027 Green Valley Farm, Trehingath. I'm the architect for that scheme.
Okay then. Any more? Okay, that's done it all. Thank you. We'll go straight on to report of the Managing Director for site inspections, agenda item 4. Anything to add, Marcus?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Move we note?
Yeah.
All happy?
Yeah.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, building regulation applications. Other building control matters determined by the Head of Regeneration and Planning under the delegated powers. You can see that on page 1. Marcus, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Move.
Thank you. Move we note. Everybody happy?
Yeah.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, planning applications determined by the Head of Regeneration and Planning under his delegated powers, which you can find on page 8. Anything to add, Marcus?
Nothing to add, Chair.
There you are. Nothing to add. Move we note.
Yeah.
Everyone happy?
Yeah.
Thank you. Agenda item 7, appeals, which can be found on page 23. Marcus, anything to add to those appeals?
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to point members' attention to one of the appeal decisions, that of, hang on a second, Sunamore, land at Sunamore, page 27. This was an enforcement notice, or members may recall, that was served in respect of the unauthorised use of of land for residential purposes, and sighting of a mobile caravan, horse lorry. I was pleased to note we did succeed there, and the appeal was dismissed, and indeed we won costs as well in that appeal.
Yes.
Yeah, just to say that having read all those details, compliment the enforcement team and Marcus on that. Very well handled, and the right result that we were all fairly confident with. But a plea from the residents of Bonvilston: keep an eye on Redway Road, which is where he's got the appeal decision, with a lot of conditions which need to be kept very careful eye on.
Okay. Move we note?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody happy? Thank you. 8 is trees, which can be found on page 33 and the delegated list. Aye. Members move we note. Happy? Thank you. 9, which is enforcement action, which can be found on page 35. This is land and buildings at 32 Archer Road, Penarth. Marcus, would you like to lead us through that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is in respect of a property which is sited within the Penarth Conservation Area, and as you see from the report, the sites are abutted by Victoria Lane and Westbourne Road to the west and east, respectively. This enforcement action relates to a fence that has been erected to the rear of the property, adjacent to the highway. It doesn't benefit from permitted development rights as it's greater than 1 metre in height. It is a close boarded fence, which is inappropriate in the conservation area. We are seeking for it to be reduced in height to a maximum of 1 metre, as that is the most we can do under our enforcement powers. As I say, clearly it is unacceptable in the conservation area.
Okay, well, what the officers are asking you to do is to authorise and serve enforcement notice section 172 of the Town and Country Planning Act as amended, reduce the height and enclosure to 1 metre in height, and 2, to remove any resultant waste from the above operation. In the event of non-compliance with the notice, authorisation is also sought to take such legal proceedings as may be required. Any member want to?
As the ward member, I'd like to thank Marcus for this action. Thank you.
Okay, are you moving the recommendation? Okay. Seconded by Councillor Penrose. Any other member? Otherwise I'll go straight to the vote. Those in favour of the enforcement action, please show. That's clearly carried. Thank you. We're on to planning agenda item 10 now, and the first one, Sully Sports. So I'm leaving the chair to the vice chair, and we'll leave the room.
Good evening, everybody. Oh, I forgot. Good evening, everybody. Right, on to the planning application for the Sully Sports and Social Club, South Road. Before we start, I'm going to read out a statement, please, because we have to be very careful here this evening. Having carefully received the report, which is on today's agenda, the monitoring officer is satisfied there is enough evidence to continue with the planning application. Planning committee to take the view on the weight of all the letters that's been sent in. We have enough planning information here to carry on with this planning application. At the concerns regarding the paragraph on pages 53 and 54 of the report, which has been referred by the council to the police. No discussion will be permitted in relation to this aspect, as this could against us in any appeal or anything like that. We could jeopardise. So we are not discussing anything that the police will come back on us. This is an application for the planning. So we have to discuss the planning application, and that's it. So I will now move on to the planning application. Can I ask the officer?
Sorry, on a point of order, and I'm not disputing what you say, but could I have legal advice why we can't discuss that? Because the matter is not sub judice, it is not before the courts, no one has been charged, no one has been arrested. The police are just apparently looking at the matter, and in the interest of transparency, I'd like to know why we can't discuss it, on what legal grounds.
Well, yeah, we've looked at the point, and the position is that we're not going to be discussing anything to do with that because it is now part of a police investigation, and any discussion may prejudice the police investigation.
Well, I with respect, it's not sub judice, is it? It is not before the courts, and I don't see how, if we were minded to discuss it, why it would prejudice an investigation. You know, if there's a crime, or if there's not a crime, committed in other circumstances, it doesn't stop anyone talking about it. So I'm not really clear why we're being told we can't say anything.
Yeah, so the point's been looked at by the monitoring officer, and the decision has been taken that any discussion may potentially prejudice any investigations taken by the police, and the decision is that we will not be accepting any discussion around the letters of support.
Or against? Okay, thank you. So can I ask the officer to read the planning application?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, this is a hybrid application submitted in respect of Surrey Sports and Social Club. Hybrid is, means that it's partially in full and partially in outline. For the demolition of the existing clubhouse and buildings, construction of a new clubhouse, 3 grassed pitches, 1 all-weather pitch, floodlights, new bowling green and pavilion, local gym building, touring caravan site and associated building, car parking and associated engineering, access and engineering works, and proposals for the construction of up to 200 dwellings with associated parking, engineering, access, play space and landscaping works. The full element of the application relates to the demolition of the existing clubhouse and buildings and the construction of the new clubhouse, 3 grass pitches, all-weather pitch, floodlights and bowling green, the gym, touring caravan, car parking and associated engineering and access works, and the outline part of the proposals relate to the construction of up to 200 dwellings and their associated works. The residential part of the site measures 6.7 hectares with approximately 5.97 hectares of development land, including highway infrastructure. The report at page 44 does detail additional parts to the scheme. I don't intend to read through all of those. Members will have those in front of them, and does include details of the proposed buildings. It's essentially an application in the countryside. It's not within the settlement boundary for Sully. We have looked at the application having regard to national policy, and the report at pages 56, 57, 58, 59 goes through national policy and local policy in respect of the development. And at page 63 outlines what is considered to be the primary issues in the consideration of the planning application, with the first point being national and local policy, the history of the site, including the appeal history of the site, the status of the current LDP, draft LDP, and the background papers. Other issues which might be weighed against those, such as impact on existing outdoor sport provision, the business case, the fact that the applicant has put this forward as an enabling development to allow the sports club to survive and develop, and also housing land supply, which members will be aware is obviously an issue that comes up quite regularly here when we discuss residential development. There are other issues which are the impact on the character of the village and its appearance from the East Vale coast and wider landscape, the design and layout of the scheme that's before you, highway impact and issues, impact on residential amenity of existing residents and drainage and flood risk, and other nominal issues which we usually talk about, ecology, archaeology, trees and hedgerows. And also, towards the end of the report, section 106 is discussed and what would be required in respect of this development for section 106 contributions. So the principle of the development is then discussed in some depth and is weighed up, and the report goes through that in some detail, weighs those various elements and comes to the conclusion that the development is unacceptable in planning terms and is recommended for refusal on the grounds set out on page 104 of the report. The reasons for refusal, just for members' attention, are the development is outside the settlement boundary of Sully and is not considered to be an appropriate form of rounding off, and has no overriding justification or material consideration to outweigh the principal policy objection against the development. The second reason is by virtue of the parameters for development, the density and indicative layout, the proposed development for 200 houses within the undeveloped coastal zone would fail to respect the coastal setting and open nature of the existing site, set against the existing settlement of Surrey, where a need for a coastal location for such development cannot be demonstrated. And finally, by virtues of the development, it would result in an unacceptable and unjustified extension of the settlement of Surrey eastwards, which would prejudice the open and undeveloped nature of the land and adversely affect the setting of Surrey, contrary to the local development plan background evidence contained within the Green Wedge background paper. Just one final point of note for members, because it is an issue that has been raised, that is this brownfield land or is it greenfield land? And your officers have looked at this in some detail and have concluded that it is greenfield land. It is not brownfield, previously developed land. It wasn't previously used for agriculture, clearly, but it is not brownfield land in the majority. There are elements, obviously, at the front of the site where the existing buildings are, which would be considered brownfield. But the majority of the site is not brownfield land.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, we'll go on to the speakers now. And the first speaker is Mr. Ian Barlow. Would you like to take your seat onto the... Can I just say to you, you have 3 minutes, and then at the end of your 3 minutes, councillors are allowed to ask you for clarification, and that is all. Okay, so once you start speaking, the clock will start. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do not intend to reiterate the written comments that have been provided by Surrey and Lavernock Community Council, but I will add certain points to what we have said in written form. Members will be aware that approval has already been given for 350 dwellings on land west of Swanbridge Road, Surrey, and there is potential for further 150 dwellings south of that approved site. To permit a further 200 dwellings to be constructed within a quarter of a mile of this approved or potential development site would totally destroy the semi-rural setting of Surrey and would totally overwhelm the limited retail and transport services currently available within the village. The proposal is clearly contrary to the extant unitary development plan and to the emerging local development plan. The proposal is contrary to the emerging local development plan's intention to provide a green wedge eastward from Clevedon Avenue towards Penarth. The proposal is outside the defined area of the village of Surrey. My council considers it is quite inappropriate for a development of this nature to take place within an undeveloped coastal zone, and this is quite contrary to policy SP1 of the emerging local development plan. Existing traffic flows in Surrey are already excessive when considering the existing highway infrastructure. The development of COG will clearly exacerbate this position, and the introduction of additional vehicles, the flow which will be generated by the proposal, is simply unsustainable. A specific issue in relation to traffic flow is the intention to include a touring caravan site in the southeast area of the proposed development. Beach Road, which would serve that site, is quite unable to sustain regular movement of caravans in its existing condition. The loss of 50% of sports provision to facilitate the construction of 200 dwellings and other units is contrary to the emerging local development plan insofar as it relates to the creating an active Wales element. It would significantly reduce sporting and recreational availability both to local adults and to local children. A proposal very similar in its nature to that before you this evening was submitted by the predecessor of St Modwen in 1992. This proposal was rejected by the Vale of Glamorgan Borough Council of the time and on appeal by the appointed inspector. It is a view of my council that the grounds for objection at that time remain extant. In conclusion, the recommendations by the planning officer in terms of refusing this application are clear and unequivocal. Surrey and Lavernock Council similarly urges you to refuse this application.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Can you turn your light off while I just ask? Is there any member who'd like to ask the late gentleman? Any member want to ask the gentleman of any qualification? No? Thank you. You can sit down. Can we have the next gentleman, Mr. Ken Jones, please? The same, Mr. Jones, you have 3 minutes, and at the end of the 3 minutes, the committee can ask you for any clarification. Once you start, the 3 minutes will... Okay? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ken Jones. I'm a long-standing resident of Sully and Lavender Community Councillor, and a member of the Saving Sully Group. Madam Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, can I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening? Secondly, could I congratulate the author of the Planning Officer's report, which is extremely comprehensive and professionally written. Sully Sportsfield have been used by Sully villagers and many from outside for sporting and recreational purposes for over 50 years. A recent press release indicated that up to 300 youngsters were playing sports on a Sunday morning. If this development goes ahead, how can 300 players be accommodated on only 4 pitches that will remain? Taking away these precious playing fields is not the answer. They should be kept and protected for our children and future generations to come. The site had a planning application refused in '91. I won't go over that again, because they still exist today and are far worse. This application goes against so many policies of the Vale Council, admirably identified in the Planning Officer's report. House 3 states that the erection of houses in the open countryside will be restricted to those justified in the interests of agriculture or forestry. The land is currently identified in the existing UDP as playing fields, green wedge, coastal belt and outside the settlement boundary of the village, policy ENV1. This council has spent many hours and thousands of pounds on the emerging LDP in which the land has the same designation. Policy MG1816. It would be unthinkable to grant planning consent for this site, which would go against policy MG24-2, where development in these areas should only be allowed if it is deemed necessary for agricultural, nature conservation or coastal access. Creating an active Wales. This document sets out the Welsh Government's and the Vale Council plans to get more people physically active. How is reducing the playing fields by 50% going to achieve this and accommodate the needs of the existing and new residents? Vision and Objective Section 5 states that the local authority will support the retention of community facilities and services and ensure that any new developments, particularly housing, does not impose undue pressure on schools, community and health facilities. How can another 200 houses, in addition to the 350 houses at Cog and the now 576 proposed for Cosmiston, not have an adverse effect? Sully Primary School is at capacity. There is no secondary school. The doctor's surgery is oversubscribed. There are very few employment opportunities and public transport is totally inadequate to accommodate the travel needs of these developments. The majority of residents will have to travel by car, thereby adding to the rush hour chaos that exists today. This is totally unacceptable. The club says it's in financial trouble and could close. The viability of any business should not be a factor in granting planning consent. This development is not the answer. Surely a robust business plan could be formulated to ensure its survival. In conclusion, I would urge councillors to uphold the Planning Officer's recommendation and refuse this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you... Is there any member who would like to ask the gentleman any qualifications? Clarifications? Any member? No? You can step down, sir. Councillor Marnie, I believe you would like to speak.
Thank you.
When you're ready, Councillor Marnie, you have 3 minutes, okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity of addressing you tonight. I strongly suspect that we'll all be repeating the same things here, so I'll try to go on a slightly different tack. I mean, I could go on about housing policies and whatever. It's possibly one of the most comprehensive planning reports I've ever seen, with the list of reasons, legal planning reasons why this development shouldn't go ahead. Is possibly the largest I think I've ever seen on any planning application. In fact, I'd probably say I'm staggered that any reputable organisation even got this plan off the ground to bring it here tonight, but they're perfectly entitled to, of course. As somebody who grew up as a young child living in Sully, myself and other Sully children spent virtually our entire lives over those playing fields, and I've watched generation after generation of children playing on it ever since. As has already been said, we've had 350 houses approved for Cog Road, application for another 150. In the Vale Zone draft LDP, they're now proposing the best part of another 600 for the ward just on the road in Cosmston. That would be over 1,000 houses, well over 1,000 houses in this small area, compact area. That surely is a reason for not only keeping but even enhancing sporting and green facilities rather than concreting over them. I was going to go on to a subject that we've been told, advised, I should say, not to. I wasn't going to go on about the police action, but other aspects I've been disappointed with the behaviour of the developers. Following that advice, I will stay away from what I was going to say, which was going to be pretty scathing to say the least, because I wouldn't like to jeopardise anything. One or two things that I think I should highlight, and perhaps we could have clarification on, is this. Yet again, we have a traffic report carried out which makes no mention this time of any addition to the traffic flows. You might recall my last highly critical comments to the planning department on their thoughts that 500 new houses at Sully would add 13 new total cars during rush hour. This one doesn't even mention any new cars, but just says it'll be fine because of £24,000 of improvements at McDonald's roundabout. Well, as somebody who has fought for drop-down curbs in Sully, and I know that just one drop-down curb costs £7,000, one must wonder what you get for £24,000 that's going to magic away the increased traffic flow that isn't even mentioned in this report. One other slight thing, just mentioned there actually by the previous speaker, an enabling motion. I am absolutely stunned that St Modwyn's and the other applicant, the joint applicant, could even put this forward. Every person in this room here on the planning committee knows there is no legal basis for that. In fact, the only one I can recall being heard, an enabling, was a historic building. I think it was, wasn't it a former abbey? So how on earth that could even be put forward, and also gives measure to the pathetic application that you're being asked to judge on here. And I would ask you to reject it for the reasons that the planning department have given you. Thank you.
Would you like to come back on anything that Councillor Marnie has said? Or? Okay. Okay. Right, we go into now for the people that's going to speak for it. Can I ask Jo Davis, please, to take a seat? The same applies, so once you start speaking, you'll have 3 minutes, okay? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jo Davis, Senior Director of Planning Consultancy GVA, and I'm here to speak on behalf of St Modwyn's. Firstly, in reference to the issue raised within the officer's report regarding the support letters potentially not being genuine, I would like to state that St Modwyn does not condone any misrepresentation of public opinion.
Can I ask you, please, not to mention them,
Thank
please?
you. What I would therefore ask is that the members consider this application on its material merits, and those are looking against clear sporting, health, community, economic, housing, social, regeneration and tourism benefits that the scheme will deliver. Firstly, Sully is identified as a settlement where development is envisaged and the site is acknowledged by members as being a sustainable location within their report. Second, the Council does not have a formalised 5-year housing land supply position as part of its LDP is not adopted. Very significant weight must be given to the benefits of the application proposals, including the provision of a housing supply in the short term. Thirdly, there is no grounds for refusal based on the impact of local services, noting a policy compliant Section 106 package including 40% affordable housing, contributing towards meeting a clear need. Number 5, the scheme has addressed all technical matters with no outstanding statutory technical reasons to object to the application. The concerns regarding the views on South Road and the public right-of-way fail to afford appropriate weight to the significant existing buildings and clutter which currently restrict the views, and the entire South Road frontage was previously lined with conifer trees which restricted views for approximately 40 years. In any case, I would suggest any new development in the Vale would be visible from immediate viewpoints, so this cannot be a sound reason for refusal. The refusal references the Green Wedge and settlement boundaries is completely undermined by the recent LDP MAC proposals for 341 dwellings at Upper Cosman Farm, and within the same Green Wedge, this is within the same Green Wedge and arguably provides a significant greater impact than our site as it spills out into open agricultural land. Not only is it Sully's site we consider previously developed, it is contained by existing development and infrastructure on 3 sides, with coast on the 4th, therefore providing a logical rounding off opportunity. It is not a typical Green Wedge site. There appears to be no sound evidence planning justification for removing Sully Sportsfield from the short list of considered sites for inclusion in the MAC document. Our recent representations demonstrate that the site clearly outperforms all the MAC sites, which are assessed when assessed against the Council's sustainability appraisal. On these reasons, we strongly urge you to reconsider the officer's recommendation and approve this application.
Thank you. Is there any member like to any clarification? No? Right, thank you. You can stand down. The next speaker is Mr. Mike Stafford. Right, Mr. Stafford, this is the same procedure. You have 3 minutes, so once you start, okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. My name is Mike Stafford. I'm the president of Study Sports and Social Club and been a member for over 40 years. The club, who are joint applicants with St Modwyn, comprises of 2,000 members, all of all ages, including over 500 children who use the site for recreation, 600 members of the football and rugby sections alone. The sections also include the indoor and outdoor bowls clubs, the radio club, a women's skittle team, a snooker team, and is used by community groups, fitness classes, as well as providing a social and function facility. The club has overwhelming support of its members and users. The cost of maintaining the club facilities cannot be sustained going forward, especially the main club building. Despite our efforts to improve financial performance and market the facilities for hire, the steady decline in annual income over the past several years means that we do not have the available funds to reinvest in upgrading our 1960s clubhouse to deliver a more fit-for-purpose 21st century facility that is accessible to all age groups, abilities, and caters for wheelchair users and those of other disabilities. The gradual change in people's social habits over the years has meant that we've seen a significant decline in the number of customers eating and drinking with the club. The withdrawal of Barry Plastics from using the club for numerous functions each year has also significantly reduced the club's income and ability to reinvest. This is compounded over the last few years by the number of football matches and rugby matches cancelled. 13 football matches cancelled last year due to poor weather making the pitches unplayable. This is why we are working in partnership with the leading regeneration specialist, St Modwyn, to propose a sustainable long-term development plan that will enable the club improvements and protect the long-term future of the facilities. The key benefits of the plan include brand new clubhouse, change of facilities, outdoor bowls, and enhanced pitches and training facilities for use by members paying very accessible subscriptions. The brand new 3G pitch, available for rugby and football use, will provide a desperately needed all-weather facility for the club, and local teams will also provide an income. The sustainable income streams via the new gym and caravan park, and the caravan park itself will help reduce the current deficit of touring caravan facilities identified in the Vale's tourism strategy. It will protect the existing 14 jobs and the creation of up to 18 new jobs, as well as providing an added spend in the local economy from visiting club members and people attending sport and social events and the users of the caravan park. And the provision of much needed new homes on the proportion of the site will provide all the required funding to build the new sports and community facilities at no cost to the taxpayer. In summary, there is no alternative. The proposal in front of you has taken a significant number of years to reach you in this form, and have demonstrated to be the only solution for the club going forward in a sustainable manner. Without them, the club will close and the facilities will be lost to members and the community and could be then become derelict. The club therefore respectfully asks members not to ignore our plight and to allow this development to take place in order to deliver a state-of-the-art sporting, tourism and leisure facility for the Vale and Sully.
Thank you. Can you turn your mic on? Thank you. Any members? Any members want to? No? You can step down now. Would the officer like to come back and answer?
I can come in now and just answer a couple of questions or a couple of issues that were raised. Obviously, the issue of the traffic assessment of the application was raised by the local councillor. I would draw attention to page 90 of the report, which does deal with that, but also to the comments of the Highways Development team at page 48. We don't actually have the Highways Development Officer with us here today, but essentially the applicants have submitted a transport assessment which has been independently audited and has concluded that the information they have provided is generally robust. There are minor issues that were raised. Those were dealt with. However, the issue of highway traffic is not considered to be an issue which would be warrant a refusal on its own. So, as I say, those matters were dealt with in some detail at page 48 and page 90 of the report. The issue of enabling development was also raised by the local councillor, and just to clarify, as I think he rightly said, enabling development is referred to at page 84 and is in planning law only relevant when you're dealing with heritage issues. You will see that is dealt with in some detail at page 84. There is a whole section on enabling development, and it refers to the issue of heritage asset. This obviously isn't that, so it would not constitute a valid enabling argument. Moving on to the comments by the speaker, who was the applicant's agent. Housing land supply and the issues around housing land supply are dealt with at page 80, and I think the relevant paragraph, if you like, is page 81. It is not disputed there is a need to maintain adequate housing land supply for future housing land supply studies when the LDP is adopted. However, this does not outweigh in principle all other material considerations, particularly if a development is considered harmful in any other respect. For example, if it does not accord with national policies, or if it would be harmful to the deliverability of the wider strategy of the LDP. So that sets out within the context of how much weight we must give to this housing land supply issue. The issue of the MAC consultations which have recently been taking place was also raised. That is not relevant to this application, but it is a point of note that the issue of the loss of the green wedge or the open land is certainly dealt with in some detail in this report, and your officers would stand by how that is dealt with. That's it really in terms of the issues.
Thank you. We will go into the discussions of the application now. Would the Sully member like to speak first?
If I may, Chair, could I reserve the right to speak after some of the other councillors have had opportunity to speak?
That's up to you. That's up to you. Councillor Burnett. I was going to say Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, as usual, and has been commented on, our officers have given a full appraisal of the application in relation to planning policy. So actually, I'd move officer recommendation.
Seconded.
Right, so has anybody got any other proposal?
I certainly don't have a proposal, and I endorse the move to to refuse. But can I explore with the officers the robustness of our case in the event of an appeal, listening carefully to the applicant's comments? I wonder if the officer could again comment on the 5-year supply of land. I didn't quite grasp what you were saying. And then secondly, are you confident that we can comprehensively resist a claim that this would be a rounding off to, I think it's Beach Road, but the road down to the seaside anyway. And thirdly, slightly along that line of rounding off, has the fact that this authority has granted planning permission for some hundreds of houses off Cog Road.
Now that's a different application.
Yes, but that has started to move the Sully boundary in an easterly direction. Is there a risk that that will be used against us? Thank you.
We're going to let the officer answer that, and then we're going to take the vote because that's been moved and seconded. Okay. Well, we'll have a smoke. But I'll let the officer speak now.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the issue of housing land supply is one that we've discussed many times with this committee. And as I've previously advised, it is not the be-all and end-all when making decisions. It is a material consideration, and the weight you attach to that material consideration depends very much on what other material considerations exist in respect of a particular development. You will probably recall the development for Primrose Hill in Cowbridge, where we had very much the same debate around the weight that should be attached to the housing land availability. In this particular case, your officers have looked at this application, have weighed up the facts, which are that we don't have an adopted LDP at the moment, therefore we can't argue a housing land supply, although we can argue a nominal supply but worked out on the basis of what approvals we have made. That would not on its own stack up in any appeal situation, and it is worthy to note that. But your officers have considered what is proposed here against the national policies, local policies in respect to this area of land, and have weighed that to be not sufficient reason to counterweight, if you like, the views that is unacceptable. So that is how that stands. In terms of the merit of this case, were there to be any appeal, we can never second guess an inspector. I can't give you a cast iron guarantee that an inspector will not make a different decision on this. There's no planning officer in Wales or indeed the country who would. Your officers make recommendations based around what they consider to be the relevant evidence. This is a very, very substantial report which goes through all the issues. It considers and weighs up all those various issues and has come to the conclusion that this application should be refused for the grounds that are recommended to you. I feel that it is a case which could be substantiated at appeal. Unfortunately, I can't give you a guarantee it would be won at appeal. That's not the way the process goes. And in terms of rounding off, obviously having regard to the other applications that have been granted and the other allocations in the area, this applicant had the option when the LDP was subject to review back in 2012 to have submitted this site for consideration. They didn't at that time. So we could not have considered it then to put forward, albeit we did look at it. It was part of the review of the Green Wedge, part of the process and the review paper associated with the Green Wedge. And the review was taken, it should be included within the Green Wedge area. In doing that, it would have, in our eyes anyway, automatically discounted it from being a housing site. I don't think the fact that the LDP as it stands is allocating other sites within the proximity but not close by would have any bearing on this particular site itself. You've heard me say many times, each application is dealt with on its own merits, and that would be very much the case here.
To take the local member.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, normally I would be coming out with quite a speech on the reasons why they shouldn't go ahead. It's been covered more than amply. I think the officers' report have covered all the objections which local residents have put forward, and I'm quite gratified for Councillor Burnett for proposing. The reason I asked a delay was to give free debate on the matter whether before I made a proposal, but I'm quite happy to go to a vote as it's been moved and seconded. Thank you.
Go straight to the vote then. It's been moved and seconded that you recommended by the officers for refusal. All in favour for that recommendation, please show.
Just bear with us a second. We've got a few technical problems. Yeah. Oh, right. Just on the corner there. I'll just use this then, and then it'll save a bit of time. Okay. Out the door, Chris. Okay. Yeah, I think we ought to wait till the clerk comes back then. Yours is working. Yeah, but mine's not back on. Do you change?
I'm good.
The signal is intermittent. There's a couple of use the mobile phone and interfering with the signals. So it decays the signal. Again.
Yeah. I'll carry on with Margaret. Okay. We're back on page 146. This is land Pentre Myrick.
What? Yeah.
Page 146. Did anybody understand that? This is land at Pentre Myrick, which you remember we had a site visit about 12 months ago, and the committee deferred it for further consultation with the applicants. It was to do with the busy road crossing on the main road. So I'm going to ask Marcus to lead us through the report, and I think the officers are recommending acceptance now. Okay, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and members will recall, I can't believe actually it's over nearly 12 months ago this was being considered by the committee. At that time, it was recommended for refusal for 3 reasons, which are in the report there at page 146 and 147. And members decided to defer the application to allow the applicant to discuss with the Highway Authority the provision of a safe crossing of the A48 to access the bus stop on the other side. Since that time, there have been long-standing negotiations which have ultimately come up with a scheme which will overcome the concerns of the Highways Officer I have put the plan up on the screen for you. Typical.
Thank you, Chair. I would I would move acceptance of the officer's recommendation. Councillor Roberts came up with a suggestion which was very sensible. One of the other benefits of this new scheme is it will improve the situation for the residents that are already in the little hamlet of Pentremyric, and the improvement of safety is paramount. Therefore, I would move approval.
Seconded.
Yeah, we've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hodges.
I won't use this as a speaker like
I've got no issue with this.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, agree with this now, Chairman. It's we asked our officers to make improvements. Improvements have been made. That's great. Just a query. I know it's an old consultation on page 151, but it's got Pentline Community Council. They feel they've got a part to play in the development of the local lettings policy. I assume that is not the case. Yeah, quite. Yeah. Yeah.
Enacted on this site and in all these rural affordable housing sites, that is the intention. Okay.
Okay. Please show. Well, that is unanimous. So, thank you for that. Can we move to page 190, which is the land to the east of Mink Hollow, St Nicholas? Marcus, would you like to lead us through that report? Oh, sorry, Ian. Ian Robinson is going to speak next.
Members recall this application was reported to committee a month ago when it was deferred for the highways officer to provide comment on whether there was sufficient manoeuvring space for large vehicles to turn within the site. On page 193 is the response from the highways engineer, concluding that they're satisfied there is sufficient space for large vehicles to turn within the site. Further commentary on that is provided at pages 217 and 218, and there's a plan on page 218 which shows the swept path.
Can I just stop? Can you just turn your mic off a second?
Yeah.
Right. Somebody has got a mobile phone that's interfering with the microwaves in this room.
Well, it
Right.
started before that.
Yeah, it started before that. We can't make that work. So let's just test it. Does that help? Yeah, we are. I'm back on.
Right. The officer was halfway through his...
Yes. Could I ask you to continue then, Ian?
You were-
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, sorry. There's a layout shown on page 218, which shows the swept path for vehicles turning. You'll note within the layout, 3 trees are shown. Now, the plan suggests vehicles can turn while the trees are there, but just for the avoidance of any doubt, there's a condition requiring full landscaping details to be submitted, which will be, when the details are submitted, that'll be discussed along with the high-rise engineers, just to be absolutely sure they're happy that that doesn't prejudice vehicles turning within the site. But in summary, the high-rise engineers are happy that there is space.
Okay, I think it was deferred because Councillor Penrose questioned the viability of turning of vehicles and Pentakian vehicles, was it? Or?
Something like that.
Right, okay then. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. No, it was questioned because we only had an outline plan. Now we've been furnished with, by the applicant, with swept path diagrams for vehicles, provided that there isn't any vehicles parked in that area. It would appear vehicles can turn, and I'm quite happy now to propose that we accept officer's recommendations.
Got to go and get.
We've got to wait until Andrew goes up.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So we got Green Valley Farm on page 255, and I think we'll hand over to. Are you doing this, Marcus? Yes, Marcus is going to do this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for Green Valley Farm, Trehingaeth, for the demolition of an existing agricultural shed and the construction of a 3-bedroom detached dwelling on the site. The site is currently within the settlement of Trehingaeth, which is a House 2 settlement within the current unitary development plan. That means there is a settlement boundary around the village, and therefore the locating of a house on this site would be within that settlement boundary and would accord with the policy of the unitary development plan. Your officers have gone through in the report in some detail, looking at the various issues we normally assess when we dismiss the policy, any policy objections. That includes the principle of development, obviously for policy-wise, the design and scale of the house, the amenity space, the access and parking provision, any possible impacts on neighbouring properties, and conflicts with the approved application on a neighbouring house. And we have come to the conclusion that the development is acceptable. There are a couple of key points of note. There is a late representation. All that late representation refers to is amended plans which were submitted by the applicant, basically adding a bay window to the ground floor of the dwelling to improve its look, because it had a blank wall facing the junction and now will have a bay window in it. The other issue it raised was a confirmation that the applicants are willing to enter into a legal agreement to provide an off-site payment for affordable housing within the vicinity. So they have agreed to that as well. So on that basis, your officers are recommending it for approval.
Okay, we move swiftly on. This is an application on page 269 for Teabrook Park Farm. It's St Donat's, which was subject to a site visit today. And we went along just to look at the roads and the site in general. I know that there are 3 speakers, 2 against, 1 for. I think the local member might want to speak as well. Yeah, okay. So I'll ask the officer to go through the report with us.
Okay, this is another application that was before us previously. It was deferred for a site visit, which happened today, principally to look at the issue of access to the site and whether the highway network was adequate to support it. Further to last month's committee, there's been representations by the applicant making a commitment to directing customers using the development to informally use the lanes in a one-way system. If you look at page 281, it shows a plan where those arriving to the development would be directed to use the lane on the right-hand side and then exit via the other lane in an attempt to minimise any potential for vehicles meeting, given the relative width of the lane. This is contained in a condition at the rear of the report. There have been late representations from neighbours, again going on over the issues of access to the site and also the appropriateness of an informal one-way system. There have also been late representations regarding drainage and some concerns regarding the capacity of the septic tank. There is a condition recommended requiring full details of drainage to be agreed. Therefore, if the application were approved and details submitted, the planning officers can consult with the relevant bodies to establish whether what is there is adequate or whether any increases in capacity is necessary. So officers are of the opinion that the conditions protect our position in terms of the environment and drainage of the site. Just one further issue, just to expand on it, something in the report that wasn't covered in a great deal of detail previously. In the planning history on page 272, you'll note that the site previously had permission and operated as a bed and breakfast facility with 4 bedrooms, I believe. So it's just drawing members' attention to the previous nature of the use of the site, albeit it was the main house as opposed to these barns, and just highlighting reference to the number of vehicles and the pattern of movements that would have been associated with the historic use of the site.
The planning officer is finished. I think we now take the local member who has 3 minutes to speak to us, starting from when he starts speaking.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a few issues here which I want to bring to the attention once again tonight. Firstly, I would refer you to page 273, the highway development. This was the highway department objected to the proposed development due to the narrow access of the road to the site. Well, we saw this morning basically the narrow road. Very interesting to read the idea of the applicant to have a one-way system, but I'm afraid that putting signs up can't happen. It can't be put on the highway verge. Any change to that road would have to be a highways regulation. So quite simply, there was an application to our highways department for a one-way system on that road. And quite honestly, the one-way system on that road wouldn't work because farmers need to get to the relevant fields either side of the lane. So it just does not work, the swing of getting into the fields. So quite honestly, that is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned and would possibly cause more accidents. Also, there are 3 people living on that area, and 2 of those would object to that consultation from highways. So it's a no-goer from day one, a one-way system. Going on from there, I'd like to refer you to page 272, St Honest Community Council. They raise a very valid point here. They say, we have concerns that the water supply in the area will not be able to produce sufficient pressure to serve the proposed additional units. Fair point. But the point I'd like to raise is, what about fire hydrants? I understand there's not a fire hydrant in the area, and how fire engines will access facilities easily when, quite honestly, as we saw today, a very narrow access raises another issue and the safety of people staying at the site. I'd like to move on from there with the issue on the septic tank. Now, this issue has been raised in papers today, and quite honestly, this is a really serious issue, which has not, in my opinion, been looked at thoroughly in the application. The septic tank is overflowing into adjoining properties, and reports have come forward this week in support of this. Natural Resources Wales have taken this point up again, and the only way forward for this is to have a new unit built completely. Now, I think this is in the petition accepted, but it says that this has to be done before the first unit is ready. I don't consider that is right. I consider that it should be done first before any building starts on the site, because this has been overlooked once, it could be overlooked again. And finally, I'd like to mention to you tonight who monitors the conditions. As I have known throughout my life on this council, the monitoring of conditions have become less and less and less because we haven't got the staff to monitor conditions. It's as simple as that, and I would recommend.
We have got two objectors, Mrs. Jean Payne against, and Mr. Stephen Hopkins, local residents. Would you like to come up onto the stand? You certainly may. And then I don't want you fighting who's going to go first. Lovely, thank you for that, Mr. Hopkins. Okay, Mrs. Payne, you've got 3 minutes to put over your points, and then we'll ask Mr. Hopkins, and then councillors can ask any questions arising from what you've said, matters of clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm Jean Payne. I'm opposed to the application of Tybrook. I am upset, shocked and very worried by the ridiculous suggestion of voluntary one-way road system for the development at Tybrook. I am the only resident on this part of the narrow lane. Having lived here peacefully for nearly 40 years, the one-way suggestion is dangerous not only to people walking, but horse riders and dog walkers, of which there are lots. This lane is no more than 8 feet wide, and it does not have any passing places. To suggest that my private driveway is a passing place is rude. Would they let me use their driveway? It is my private property. I walk down the lane to see my friend. I have never had any problems, as I know the time when the post is due and the day when the bin men come, and the farmers know I am about. The increase in traffic would be dangerous to me, as I am nearly 80 and unable to move very fast. And how could I avoid a car? Where do I go? Into the hedge. The lane has a lot of blind bends as well. It is almost impossible to turn right into Dimlands Road, and if you do succeed, you turn out onto a blind bend with 60-mile-per-hour speed limit. And also it will add a half a mile onto every journey. I lost my Floydie dog nearly 2 years ago, and I have just come to think about replacing him, but it would be stupid of me now to do so, as I would risk not only my life and also his walking on the lane. I had found a lovely chocolate Labrador at the dog's charity who needed a new mummy. He is 7 years old, and we could have looked after each other. It will mean that I will become more and more isolated, as I would be anxious to go out. And I shouldn't tell you this, but my friend a short while ago was hit by a car as she walked her dog on the lane. She is now very nervous, and I worry about her and her dog's safety. Please don't let this happen to me. Please just take a moment to think. I could be your Nana. Thank you.
We have another 26 seconds, but that's fine. Mr Hopkins, would you like to do yours? Thank you.
Mr Chairman Committee, thank you for visiting this morning. I concentrate on three matters: highway safety, foul water disposal and parking. I remind you, this is the third application by this applicant in 7 months, made only 10 days after you granted his last one to substantially increase the size of his house. You will now, we suggest, understand why the development to convert private stables with no associated vehicular traffic is unacceptable due to the narrow lanes you travelled along to reach and leave the site. The applicant's agent helpfully referred to them in the photograph accompanying the application as tracks. You will also have seen that there are no passing places on either. When considering a T-Brock application in 2008, Highways based their objection on safety concerns, just as Highways does now. The head of planning said, any vehicle leaving the main site of that application must be able to turn around and leave the site in forward gear. How on earth can that be achieved with the current development? As you've seen, the small proposed parking area is on a blind bend, and the heritage footpath runs through it. The suggestion that only 4 car parking spaces are required is absurd. 6 bedrooms are proposed, potentially 12 adults. No safe areas for on-road parking. This will just increase the danger. And now the applicant has forwarded documents showing that this is a commercial development, not an application for holiday lets for pin money. What of the domestic cleaning and maintenance teams, which will also increase the traffic flow? Where do they park? The approval of the parking in front of the grain barn would render a usable agricultural building unusable. There is local agricultural demand for it. The suggestion of an unenforceable voluntary one-way system is, we suggest, an admission that the site is unsuitable. Nobody in their right mind drives the narrow lane twice, apart from Mrs. Payne, because she has to. This is an active agricultural area. The lanes are used by local children and adults. You'll remember Genevieve speaking. Ridden, walked by children and their dogs. Cycled, run, used by ramblers. A highway, but a very important recreational route for locals. You have the objection from one that due to mobility issues and impaired hearing would no longer feel safe on the lanes with increased traffic. And you've just heard Mrs. Payne. 9 locals have objected. And there appears to be no suitable foul drainage system in place, even for T-Brock in its current state. I wrote to the planning officers this week, enclosing a report from Chemtech. We sent soil samples for analysis because of the applicant's report saying the foul soakaway ran into the field, my field, where a public footpath runs. Our report makes alarming reading for us and Atlantic College. I've been advised to obtain an injunction. Highways state their objection on the grounds of safety, as do we, and following your visit, I suggest you will now agree that this development is inappropriate.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any members who would like to raise any points of clarification with the 2 speakers? No? Thank you for that. Would you like to step down and take your seats? I'm now going to ask Mr. Andrew Bates from GJ Planning, who's going to speak in favour. Yeah, I'm going to tell him. Don't worry. Calm down. Right. Mr. Bates, you've got 6 minutes to put over your points in favour of this application, and the time will start when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I hope that the opportunity to visit the application site this morning has afforded committee members the chance to fully appreciate the merits of the proposal. The ease of access from the site to the coastal footpath and cycle route, along with the vehicular access to the site and off-street parking provision. As you will be aware, the application has been recommended for approval by your officers, following detailed discussions and amendments to the proposal. In response to the key points raised by objectors, we would advise as follows. Firstly, design. External works to the barns are to be kept to an absolute minimum. No extensions to the barns are proposed. The proposals have been amended following dialogue with the LPA to retain the existing window openings, and external alterations are to be kept to an absolute minimum. Secondly, the need for holiday accommodation. There is an acknowledged need for additional holiday accommodation within the Vale, and this is supported by both local and national policy. Condition 3, contained within the officer's report, would ensure that the proposed holiday accommodation could only be used as such and not as independent dwellings. Thirdly, traffic and parking. When considering the current proposal, it is important to note that the previous use of the barns to be converted would have generated a significant number of vehicular movements by large farm machinery and vehicles towing trailers. As you have seen on site today, guests will be encouraged to access and egress the site using the access lane which loops past the property as if it were a one-way system. This should minimise the chance of cars needing to pass each other along the lane, and you have seen the signage on site that the applicant has committed to provide to encourage guests to use the voluntary one-way system, and the literature detailing public transport options along with footpath and cycle route information and advising of the voluntary one-way system for vehicles accessing the site that will be provided to all guests upon booking the accommodation. I would like to stress that this is obviously a voluntary system, and the signage that members saw on site today would not be located on the highway verge. It could be located within the actual site or on the boundary of the field opposite, which is also within the control of the applicant. It is the intention of the applicants to promote the accommodation for access to the coastal footpath and heritage coast, along with being a destination for cyclists due to the site's location along Cycle Route 88. 4 off-street parking spaces are provided within the site and clear of the highway and the Millennium Heritage Trail, which passes adjacent to the eastern and northern boundaries of the site. The holiday use is also likely to be more seasonal, and there are likely to be periods of time when the accommodation is not occupied. Fourthly, ecology. A bat survey was undertaken which revealed that the existing building does not support a bat roost and that no further survey work is required. Fifthly, foul drainage. Condition 7 detailed within the officer's report requires details of foul and surface water drainage to be approved and installed in accordance with the approved details prior to beneficial occupation of the holiday accommodation. We have had sight of the comments received from NRW regarding the foul drainage of T-Brock. We have spoken with NRW and they have confirmed that they are satisfied that the proposed condition, Condition 7, requiring the provision of both a foul and surface water drainage scheme to serve the proposed holiday accommodation is acceptable to NRW. Once an application is made to discharge Condition 7, NRW will be consulted and they will have the opportunity to review the scheme and ensure that it is satisfactory prior to the condition being discharged. We would wish to advise, having now had sight of the results of a soil sample analysis provided by the neighbouring objector and had the opportunity to speak directly with Chemtech Environmental, who undertook the sample analysis, we'd like to make the following comments. Firstly, the soil samples were not collected by Chemtech Environmental. Secondly, no details are provided regarding the soil sampling process, such as the method that was used to collect the samples, where the samples were collected, and if they were collected by somebody who was trained to do so. And thirdly, no precise details of the location that the soil samples were taken has been provided, or the depths of the soil which is provided for analysis, or the method of sample extraction. Accordingly, whilst it is accepted that the local planning authority supports the proposed development and NRW has no objections, we would strongly contest the validity of the soil analysis results and would ask that members disregard this information. Clearly, further independent investigation will be required to assess whether the current drainage system is sufficient to serve the proposed development, and agreement to the proposed drainage scheme will be entirely within the control of the local planning authority, committee members and NRW in due course. In addition, despite the applicant commissioning 2 independent assessments of the existing septic tank, both of which advise that the treatment system was installed and working correctly, it is clearly in the applicant's own interest to ensure that the system is functioning correctly, and further investigation will be undertaken regardless of the outcome here today. One further matter that I'd like to mention. Mr. Hopkins mentioned that the septic tank is actually draining to his property. I think local members should be aware that there is an ongoing dispute over land ownership within the area, and the site in question is within the applicant's control, although that's not a planning matter.
Accordingly, the applicant respectfully urges the approval of this application in line with officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any points of clarification? Yes, I've got two. I'll take Mark Wilson first.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the availability of the holiday lettings,
Mic on.
My mic is on.
Yeah, it is on.
My mic is on.
There you are.
In terms
Just
of holiday
as light
lettings, is that envisaged to be possibly up to 365 days a year, or do you only envisage only using it for the summer, for example?
The intention is to use the holiday accommodation throughout the year. However, it's highly likely that it will be seasonal because the people who are probably going to be attracted to use it will be using the path and cycling.
Okay. Councillor Andrew Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I actually drove round that the two little roads twice today to measure them, and they all came out at about 2.2 of a mile. Now, my concern is that, particularly having seen a horse trailer arrive, if that trailer came down and it had just turned off the main highway, I would have to have reversed on both of them 0.2 of a mile. Now, that is quite impractical. How do you think I could have handled that situation? Because you mentioned passing bays, but I couldn't find any passing bays.
Fortunately, there's very low levels of traffic actually use that lane, so the chances of coming across somebody passing the other way are reasonably remote. However, I would say, please members bear in mind that this was a working farm and there would have been significant amounts of machinery moving in and out of that farm. And this is a typical farm lane or country lane that you find all over the Vale, and which serves other similar holiday accommodation.
With respect, Chairman, you haven't answered the question. How would I manage to deal with reversing back the whole length, possibly, of one of those lanes? Because obviously if a vehicle pulled in, a delivery vehicle, maybe, as we all understand, delivering things to it, it could not reverse back out onto the highway, and I would be forced to reverse back all the way to where we were parked this morning.
I believe there are areas within the lane that you would be able to negotiate another vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah, I rest my case. I think we all realise there are no passing bays of any use. There was one driveway on the western one. They obviously have a problem with their driveway because they actually had a chain across it to stop anybody using it as a passing bay.
Yes. I drove down there. I had this similar vision. Okay, any other member? No? Would you like to stand down? Thanks. Is the microphone off? Yeah. Okay, lovely, thank you. It's up to our officers now to come back and speak on the fors and against that we've heard just. Yes, okay. Yeah.
On the actual buildings themselves, rather than the lane, it says in the report on 270 they are primarily single-storey, although there are some bedroom spaces within the roof void. Now, they look quite squat, shall I say, but I've got no idea, apart from looking at the size of doors and things. How practical are these for actually using bedroom spaces in upper voids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back on all the issues in order, and I'll deal with that obviously in terms of. I think it's been addressed in terms of, because obviously it was raised about the one-way system, and it is the applicant's intention not to have a formal one-way system through a traffic regulation order. It is their intention to notify the visitors through the building to approach and leave along a route that is designated by them and shown in that plan. That is not an uncommon practice, given we have a number of tourism-type uses in quite isolated locations in the Vale of Glamorgan on narrow lanes, and it has happened before and has been successful. So it is their intention to apply that only to people attending this tourism accommodation. The issue of fire access was mentioned. Obviously, we have at least two existing, 3 properties down these lanes actually, but 2 at the end, 3 properties existing. That is not a reason not to refuse it, to refuse it. We haven't received any objections. I think I will draw members' attention actually to a similar issue that was raised in Lantwick Major to a conversion of a property, the old post sorting office, to flats, where there was a reference to the possibility of, firstly, vehicles not being able to pass each other, but secondly, fire engines not being able to get down a lane to access a building. And that went to appeal, and the inspector dismissed that reason as a legitimate reason for refusal. So that would not be, in this case either, a reason to refuse it. If there was a fire, it would be for the fire service to get there and deal with that. In terms of the septic tank, that issue has been obviously dealt with by the applicant's agent, but all I would reiterate for members on that is that there is a condition which requires full details to be submitted and to be agreed before they can occupy or first use the properties for tourism accommodation. That would necessitate us consulting both with Natural Resources Wales, our own building regulation team, environmental health, to ensure that the capacity was there to deal with the foul and surface water runoff from the property. Finally, in respect of heights, we do have plans. I've got them on the screen. They're obviously quite small for you to see there, but they have been looked at. We are satisfied that accommodation could be provided on mezzanines inside the properties. Indeed, it has been done in others in similar situations. You can sort of see, if I just flick the plan on there, it's the properties at the, if you like, well, I'd say the top of the plan there, which are showing mezzanine bedroom accommodation. And you can see the plan, if I move the mouse, you can see how that roof, where my symbol is now, is slightly higher than the remainder of the roofs, which will allow for that to take place. Okay.
Okay. And they'd be subject to building regulations, of course, wouldn't they?
They would be subject to building regulations, yes.
So they wouldn't be able to occupy them, but the fire officer would have to pass them, wouldn't they? As commercial accommodation. Yeah. Okay, Bob.
Yes, question for Marcus, and I'm not asking him to second guess or give any guarantees. If we were of a mind to refuse this application, it was taken to appeal, what weight would be given to the fact that there is previous planning permission for 4-bedroom bed and breakfast accommodation?
It's difficult to judge. It's a material consideration that the property's previously been used for that purpose. Clearly, it would mean that at some point in the past, you could have had up to 4 separate individuals residing or using the property for holiday accommodation. Clearly, that changed in 1992 when they applied to use the house as a single dwelling. And if you look at the planning history, you'll see that actually that was refused by the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and they won that on appeal. However, it is relevant. It's a relevant consideration that took place from the late 80s through to obviously at least 1992 when that application was made. So an inspector would look at that.
Okay. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My concern this morning actually has been borne out considerably by the letter from Natural Resources Wales with regard to the foul drainage. What I would like to do is to avoid any ambiguity on condition 7 and actually strengthen it to use the words that Natural Resources Wales use, which say, would advise that no development should be undertaken, and actually I would like to say commenced until such time that the drainage system has been resolved, bearing in mind what we've heard, and I'm not looking at it either way in terms of the problems that are there. But I'd be advised by Marcus really on the phraseology. But I think we should ensure that, because this requires a licence now to discharge the product from the septic tank or the treatment plant prior to use. So if we could put commencement, I think that would be a sensible condition.
Okay.
Chair, if I just come back on that,
Yes.
there's no reason why that couldn't go in after. You'll note on conditions that it shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and after that you could insert prior to the commencement of any works. Then you would have the approved scheme shall be fully implemented in accordance with the approved details prior to the first beneficial occupation. So you'd have an approved scheme prior to any works. So that's no reason why that can't go in there.
Okay. Any other member? Otherwise, we have to ask for a mover and a seconder. You want to remove? Can you put your mic on, because
I will.
the
hopefully
public
it'll work.
want to
Yeah,
hear
I'd
you.
like to object on the highways aspect of it, and I have to say that the proposed fix of an unenforceable traffic scheme does not satisfy me.
I'll second that.
Okay. I don't know what they. I need a reason from you, and I need it written out. Yeah, you can't just put highways. You've got to give a reason under the highways ground why you are refusing it.
The development would increase the traffic generation along the adjacent highway. The proposals would have a detrimental impact in terms of highway safety. There you go. My highways officers said it for me.
Is that acceptable, Marcus?
It's not enough, is it?
It's not really, no.
Is it? It's not enough, is it?
When Marcus is thinking about that, would an additional objection be danger to pedestrians walking along the highway? Does that strengthen it at all?
No, it wouldn't stand up.
No.
I'm told it wouldn't stand up, but why do we ask our highways people to give observations if we disregard what they say?
We're just getting a reason written down first, so that people know what they're going to vote on this refusal. Because I think people who went to the training have been told you need a refusal to hand over.
Howard.
Yeah, Howard.
Chair, whilst I'm doing that, can I just ask for clarification? My fellow councillor made a proposal in altering one of the conditions.
Yes.
Am I assuming correctly or incorrectly that if we go to approve the planning application, the proposed changes to condition 7 will actually be included in
Yes,
that?
Marcus will read it out, and then we'll know what we're voting on with subject
That's
to
fine, thank you very much,
strengthened
Chair.
conditions, yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Before I read this out, Chair, I would like to point out that members should have prepared or at least thought about a reason before they came, and it is quite unacceptable to attend a meeting and to throw reasons at officers like this. Possibly Councillor Franks would not have been here when this happened before.
One at a time.
So if Councillor Franks had that idea at the meeting, it would have been obviously useful for him to have written that down, or at least to have come to me perhaps afterwards and suggested that he had a reason. What I would say is that in cases where this has happened in the past, members have had thought about it and have a coherent reason which they could either have rather written down or read out at the meeting. It is actually one of the reasons why we do suggest that these types of decisions are deferred to allow members to think about the reasons for refusal, and it can be brought back to the meeting, and we don't have a decision taken on the hoof which can lead to poor quality reasons for refusal which don't stand up at appeal. But having said all of those things, what I would say to you is that the development would result in an increase in traffic using the adjoining highway to the detriment of highway safety, and would therefore fail to comply with the terms of policy EMV 27 of the Unitary Development Plan.
Okay, Councillor Wilson. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've had a mover and a seconder to refuse the application. Those who in favour of refusal, please show. Okay. And those against that refusal, please show. Okay. Yeah, the number of abstentions, please, from that. 4 abstentions. Okay. Now I've got to move the substantive motion. Those in favour of officer's recommendation.
You need someone to move it and second it.
Yeah.
Just come back.
Yeah.
Can I read out condition 7 as amended
Yes,
by
with this extra
Councillor
condition.
Parker, just so that that's for clarification? Notwithstanding the submitted details, this is condition 7 for clarification. Notwithstanding the submitted details, further details of the scheme for foul and surface water drainage to include details of any septic tank to be used and its capacity shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority prior to the commencement of any works on site. The approved scheme shall be fully implemented in accordance with the approved details prior to the first beneficial occupation of any of the holiday lets hereby approved.
Okay, so they can't commence that work, which is what you wanted to strengthen. Okay then, those in favour of officer's recommendation, please show. Okay. Those against? 3. And abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Okay, then that's clearly carried. And thank you to our 2 speakers. I know that 2 people have got to leave the room. I think we could be saying good night to you. Yeah, I thought we might be. Right. Right, okay then. We're on page 296, which is 9 Grove Place, Penarth, and the members who declared an interest have left the room. So it's over to the planning officer, and I think it may be Ian Robinson. You've changed your mind. Oh, okay, it's Marcus then. Yes. Okay, if members are happy to take a vote, those in... Have we got a mover and a seconder?
He's moving the second.
You're moving it, Nick, and
doesn't second us.
Pam Drake will second it. How about that? So we've got that down. Those in favour of the application, please show. There we are. That's unanimous. Can I thanks for your forbearance this evening? Thank you.